So it is my great honor to recognize and welcome the 23rd Secretary of the United States Air Force, Deborah James. Secretary James is a personal friend. Last year I invited her to ride with us in Rolling Thunder, the world's biggest one-day event. We have about 1 million people come, and I thought the Secretary would politely say, yes, but not show up. Well, I was surprised, and the Secretary showed up with her team, and we had an amazing time. Also recently, the Secretary became an honorary Tuskegee Airman and was bestowed the honorary red jacket. So without further ado, my personal friend and Secretary of the Air Force, Deborah James.
Thank you very much, Rob, for that very kind introduction, a way better introduction than the usual introduction involved with background and CVs and the like. And I also want to echo something that you just said and begin by recognizing and thanking the veterans and the family members who are here today, because you have given all of us so much. There's nothing that we can do to really express the gratitude beyond saying thank you, and also thank you for paying it forward to the young people who are here. And many of you, I know, speak regularly with groups of young people. It's really, really important that they hear your stories, that they understand that they are standing on the shoulders of icons. Like the gentleman you heard from on this panel, I know you had a fantastic session last night, and there is much, much more to come. More icons will be speaking, like Captain Jerry Yellen, who I know is here, and Lieutenant Colonel Dick Cole, who may not be present right this moment, but will be with you later on. And finally, welcome and good morning to the high school students here in the audience, as well as we're full of ROTC and Academy cadets and midshipmen from, as I understand it, the University of Virginia and Virginia Tech and VMI and Penn State, Bowling Green, Miami University of Ohio, Texas A&M, Gig'em. Did I get that right? All right, there's my Aggies. All right, the University of North Georgia, the Citadel, the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, the Naval Academy at Annapolis, West Point. Where's my West Pointers? Okay, you're going down tomorrow, you know. There's big games tomorrow. Okay, go Air Force, beat Army. And of course, what can I say? The United States Air Force Academy is here. All right, there they are. Okay, great. And also a special welcome to some members of what we call in the Air Force, of course, our total force. And now I'm speaking here of the Maryland wing of the Civil Air Patrol. This is the 75th birthday for the Civil Air Patrol, and again, an important part of our total force. So where's my Civil Air Patrol team? There they are. All right, welcome. Good morning, guys. It is really fantastic to be surrounded by so many future leaders for our military services. The fact that you have been selected to come here during this conference already speaks volumes to me about what you have accomplished so far in your lives. But believe me, there is much, much more to come. You've already heard from some incredibly inspiring people, and I tell you, you must really take in and take to heart the messages that you hear throughout this several-day conference, because they will serve you well into the future. Now, most of you here today, if not all of you here today, have made a very important and an admirable choice to at least start, if not complete, an entire career in the profession of arms, meaning protecting and defending the United States and our interests, and most importantly, our people. Your job, in short, will be, very soon, to lead us into the future. And make no mistake about it, this will be a future characterized by an unprecedented rate of change. And we're already seeing the outlines of that future, but we need to remember that we have to be ready for changes that we're not expecting, the unknown unknowns. For example, when I started this job about 3 years ago, it was December of 2013, the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan were winding down. We were still partnering in many, many ways with Russia. We expected at that point that we would have the opportunity to reset and retrain our force after 20-some years of continual combat operations. But boy, were we ever wrong, because you see, everything changed about 2.5 years ago. Russia invaded and illegally annexed Crimea. ISIL emerged seemingly out of nowhere and swept through parts of Iraq and Syria in an effort to establish their so-called caliphate. And indeed, their evil has been felt far beyond the Middle Eastern borders, as far as San Bernardino, California, and Paris, France. North Korea has been testing a series of nuclear underground explosions, nuclear weapons tests. They have fired dozens of increasingly sophisticated missiles. China has stepped up its campaign in a big way to reclaim what they call islands. They're literally coral reefs, which they have reclaimed from the ocean, and they are militarizing some of these islands. The refugee crisis in Syria has caused problems throughout the Middle East and into Europe. Ebola and Zika certainly demonstrated to all of us how a public health crisis can become a global security crisis. And I doubt, back in 2013, that most of us could have explained what a Brexit was. I know I couldn't, and yet we all have now heard of Brexit. So in short, the future did not turn out the way that we expected it would. And when the changes started happening, they came at us fast. So fasten your seatbelts, all of you, because it's going to be even faster in the future. Today's population worldwide is 7.3 billion people. By 2050, it's estimated to be 9.7 billion people. And that kind of growth is going to put enormous stress on global resources and cause challenges for governance, especially in the developing world. Half of the growth I just talked about there is going to be coming in Africa. 28 African countries are projected to double in population by the year 2050. At the same time, the population in the developed world will be aging. More than 1/3 of the population of Europe is projected to be over the age of 60 in the year 2050, and some countries, notably Japan, China, Russia, and Italy, are going to see their populations actually shrink. Now, what is all of this going to mean for the future security environment? And how about these factoids? We have a little less than one internet-connected device for each person on the planet today. By 2020, it's estimated there will be 26 per person internet-connected devices. That's more than 200 billion devices in total. Unprecedented ability to communicate. And 2/3 of today's school children, kids younger than most of you, will work in jobs in the future that don't even exist today. So how in the world do we collectively get ready for this type of uncertainty? Well, in the military, I assure you, we are doing our level best to think it through what the future might look like for us. For example, we think that more of our adversaries will try to contest the domains where the Air Force today dominates. And those, of course, domains are air, space, and cyberspace. And they will use whatever methods that they can acquire, electronic means, cyber means, and anti-access area denial strategies to try and limit our ability to operate globally. In fact, a lot of what I've just described is already happening to some degree. But will there be more? Will there be more? What about more failed states? Will we see other terrorist groups pop up? Will a conflict on Earth one day extend into space? These are all of the key questions. It's all possible, but again, it's all uncertain. The most important thing that I've learned as the Secretary of the Air Force in the last 3 years is Bob Gates, the former Secretary of Defense, was dead right when he said, we have a 100% success record for predicting the future. We predict it wrong 100% of the time. Now, all of this might sound like I don't have confidence in the military, but to the contrary, I am completely confident in one key thing, and that is our ability to react and pivot and respond to change, because our military, after all, does have the best secret weapon of all, and that's the incredibly well-trained people, especially our junior and non-commissioned officers who provide the key leadership that powers the joint force and the agile thinking that allows us to overcome adversity and rise to any challenge that they may throw at us. So as the next generation of leaders, you will need to rise to a new level of agile thinking, to be open to new ideas, to welcome new ways of doing business, and prepare for a world that is much, much more dynamic and complex than ever before. As officers, you will lead us into the future. You will inspire the men and women under your command, and you will fight and win America's wars, America's conflicts. You will one day swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and you will respond when the President calls you into service. And that goes for all types of service, all types of operations. You may be called to do a humanitarian assistance mission, disaster recovery in the Pacific. You may be called to Russia to exercise with our allies and do deterrence and reassurance for Europe in the face of a bullying Russia. You may be called to protect our own homeland or fight terror wherever it may arise. We have been doing these sorts of military missions, fighting and winning the nation's wars ever since the Revolutionary War. That is why our military exists. Now, I believe your ability to lead us into the future as a member of the U.S. military will rest on three key pillars. The first pillar, you must work hard to extend our technological edge over our adversaries. So at the moment, this is a tall order because they are catching up to us in many important ways, and we simply can't let that happen. We're already preparing our responses to the challenges we might discover in the future in all of our domains. A big part of it will be game-changing technologies that will rely on you. They'll rely on you for testing them, for operating and incorporating these technologies into our tactics, techniques, and procedures. Now, I want to just give you a few of what we view as some of these possible game-changing areas, which, when combined, we hope and believe will give us the next big advantage in a future conflict. So we're talking about things like autonomous learning systems. These are computers that learn and adapt to help work through big data, sort out the signal from the noise. And then there's human-machine collaboration approaches. These are machine assistants that allow the human operator to focus on the most crucial issues of life and death that only a person can make, and the machine will do the rest. Then there's assisted human operations approaches. Think of wearable technology and combat apps that combine sensors, computers, and communications, and might one day even give our operators a virtual presence on satellites. And then there's human-machine combat teams. This is a smart mix of piloted and unpiloted systems that will help us protect our people and maximize our capabilities. And finally, there's what we call network-enabled semi-autonomous technology. So these are platforms that can share information and communicate even if they lose data links or GPS access in a contested environment. So again, these are approaches and technology areas which, when combined, we think may well give us the next big advantage in the military space. Basically, I envision a future where an F-35 pilot commands a flight of uninhabited stealth wingmen that allow her to infiltrate enemy airspace undetected while a cyber attack cripples the adversary's air defense system, where space and cyber assets send her constant updates on real-time information to keep her always one step ahead, and where she's able to strike her target and evade pursuit while generating more data that airmen in the multi-domain operations center can use to pinpoint targets for the next mission. Now, the degrees that you are earning today are preparing you to build on that technological edge. But it's also important to remember that those degrees that you are earning are more than that. They represent, in many cases, a large investment of taxpayer dollars in you, and also an investment of the taxpayers' trust in you. And I will tell you, you must spend the dollars wisely, and you must keep that trust always. Which brings me to the second pillar, which is important as you lead us into the future. You must ensure that our military is efficient and accountable. As high school and college students, you're learning the value of hard work, but as ensigns and lieutenants, you're going to be responsible for a lot more than that. The resources you steward will contribute to an even greater responsibility, which is, of course, protecting freedom, American lives. You'll operate tanks and aircraft and ships that cost millions, probably in many cases billions of dollars, and you'll safeguard our nuclear deterrent. You'll guide the satellites that keep us all connected. These assets will one day be entrusted to you by the American people, and believe me, these assets are precious. Budgets are constrained. They're going to remain constrained for the foreseeable future, and we simply have to make every dollar count. As junior officers, you'll rely on your insight and advice. We will rely on your insight and advice. In the Air Force, for example, we have a program called Airmen Powered by Innovation. And this is where we're asking people out on the field, on the flight lines, at all levels, to send us their ideas for efficiencies, something that we would never recognize in Washington, particulars which, if we would adopt the idea and populate it across the Air Force, then we begin to save some real money. It's been a very successful program, and it's a culture of efficiency. And this brings me to the third pillar, which is to ensure that our military leverages the finest talent America has to offer. Talent like we have here in this room. Talent which we need in order to lead us into the future. Talent to think critically and solve problems. Talent to adapt to rapidly changing circumstances, to be decisive even in the face of ambiguity, to make the most of scarce resources, and to have the moral courage to stand up for what is right at all times. Our future readiness will depend on our ability to draw talent from every sector of society and from every corner of this nation. You must be committed, all of you need to be committed to building a military where every soldier, sailor, airman, and Marine is able to succeed and advance according to his or her own talents and dedication, where people from the active duty, from the National Guard Reserve components can all come together and bring their expertise to the table, fight as one team, and go after the toughest problems in the world together, where we can build agile thinking, skillful teams from diverse backgrounds, experiences, demographics, and perspectives, but within all that diversity, we're still united in the commitment to the ethical and expert profession of arms. And the very core of this is creating an environment and a culture where everyone is treated with dignity and respect, and where forms of violence like sexual assault have no safe haven. And lastly, you must remember to always live by the military's core values. Each of the military services states the core values in a slightly different way, but believe me, we're all on the same page. So it's honor, courage, and commitment in the Navy and Marine Corps. Loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage for the Army. And for the Air Force, integrity first, service before self, and excellence in all that we do. And now, before I turn it over to you to answer questions, I just want to tell you a few of my personal lessons learned in life. These lessons that I'm about to share with you have helped me both personally and professionally. They've helped me when I was an individual contributor. They have helped me as a leader, and I offer them up to you now in the hope that perhaps there might be a nugget or two that would be of use to you as you go forward in your lives and careers. So the number one leadership lesson learned for me, or the lesson learned in life for me, is be prepared to zigzag in your life, because life doesn't always turn out as you think. You will have one curveball after the next. Just look at the changing world that I described to you earlier today. It's not so much what happens to you, particularly if something bad happens to you. That's not the big deal. The big deal is what you do in the aftermath. So what I always like to tell people is it's great to have a plan A, but be prepared to pivot to whatever that plan B may be. One door will close, but another door always will open, and you need to be prepared to walk through that door. Number two is the importance of always building competence. And for me, and I dare say it will be the same for you, competence is a matter of continual learning in your life. You're never too old to learn, so keep it going, and sometimes you even may need to reinvent yourself along the way. And always remember, do the very best that you can do at the job or the task that you have right now. Don't be so concerned about what the next job or task may be. Get the one now done correctly and to the best of your ability, and the next one is very, very likely to follow. Number three is seek out a mentor. And when you're ready, you need to give back, and you need to be a mentor yourself. So this means simply just seek out people who have blazed a path, who are working in an area that interests you, that you admire. Be bold enough to just go up and even ask them to have a cup of coffee and just say, this is what I'm doing. I would love to hear your story. You'd be surprised how people love to talk about themselves. And this will work 95% of the time. And by the way, the people that you're meeting at this conference, particularly the veterans who are speaking to you, these are fantastic mentors. So if you have a chance to get them on the sideline and ask more questions and hear more of their stories, I recommend you take that chance. Number 4 is communicate, communicate, communicate. You can never, ever do enough of this. You have to work on your verbal skills, be able to explain yourself verbally. This will be terribly, terribly important when you're leading members of the military as young officers. And it's also, in my opinion, very important to not just explain the what has to happen, but also the why. Give people some context so that they can also, you can create buy-in that way. So verbal is very important, so is the written word, but let's not forget at least 50% of communication is listening. Be a good and active listener. Again, will be very important once you get into a position of leading military personnel. 5th is integrity must be your foundation. I already talked about this a little bit, but integrity in your personal life, your professional life, it's crucial. And it's the inner voice that will lead you to do the right thing, even when it's hard and even when no one is looking. And finally, always put your people first. This is really, really key. The men and women under your command will be the most valuable resource that the military possesses. Think about their needs, give them avenues to succeed, keep the families in mind as well, treat everyone with dignity, listen, and push them to be their best. Soon you will inherit the mantle of leadership in tomorrow's military, and I would charge all of you to lead us into the future. Lead us into a future that will use domains, undersea, sea, land, air, space, and cyberspace. Use these domains in novel and interconnected ways to an even greater degree than we're doing today. A future that capitalizes on some of the new technologies that I described, remembering always, though, that the taxpayer's dollar is precious and we can't afford to waste any of those dollars. Lead us into a future where you'll be asked to solve complex, multifaceted problems and where your resolve will be tested over and over again, where you will confront and conquer the challenges of a world in flux. Lead us into a future with a more diverse and inclusive workforce and help foster an environment and culture of a commitment to ethics and duty and dignity and respect. You'll be asked to protect the lives of the men and women under your command, lead them bravely and conscientiously, take care of the families, and represent America at its best. So I charge you to use your knowledge, your commitment, your passion, and your leadership skills to ensure that we remain forever the greatest military on the planet. Thank you very, very much, and look forward to your questions.
Baker from United States Military Academy. A current unknown known is the future role of the American to American security coming from that region.
From the Middle East region, I think the greatest threat is the fact that there is no agreement between the various populations in the Middle East. You've got various sectarian battles that are raging. And a key worry is even after we defeat ISIL in Mosul, which the battle for Mosul is on, the next step will be the road to Raqqa, which is the capital of their so-called caliphate in Syria. So I have no doubt in my mind that they will be defeated on the battlefield, but the ideology will live on, and the ideology is in part spurned by the fact that there are all these sectarian divisions. So I think that is going to be an ongoing problem for the world. And even when you defeat a force like this militarily, they skulk away in the middle of the night and try to live on another day and fall back to more terrorist types of activities. So what we've been engaged in is more of a direct, I'll say, force on force with a flavor of terrorism in it, but I think that will shift once they're defeated, and then it will fall back to a much more what we would consider a traditional terrorist type of an approach. So it's going to be, I think it's going to be the challenge of your generation. Yes, please.
Good morning, ma'am. Ken Levinson from everyone may be connected. How would you recommend we go about communicating in the most concise?
Well, the first thing I would tell you is, as future military leaders, when you get into a position of command and responsibility for others, you've got to make that face-to-face communication work. It might be hard, and obviously the higher up you go and the more breadth of responsibility you have and the more people, it'll get harder and harder. But I would urge you, don't give up on that. So that's point one. Point two is we all have to be technologically savvy. We have to do our best to be technologically savvy today and use all the forms of social media, but without putting our life story out on the internet. It's very important to do it sensibly, but to be able to communicate. I, for example, do Facebook, I do Twitter, I do all of these things in an effort to communicate not only with the airmen, but also with the public, with Congress, all of the different stakeholders that we have. So it's an ongoing challenge. I have worked in government, I have worked in the private sector, and no matter how often you think you say something, write something, instruct something, explain something, I find it is never enough. And in the business world, we used to call a layer within our company the thermal layer. So in other words, the senior people would all get together, we would all agree on a way forward, we would communicate down to our people, and then maybe they would communicate one more level, and somehow there it would stop. That was the so-called thermal layer. And I think we have a similar problem in the military. We're a large organization. So I don't have a silver bullet. I work at communication all the time myself, but don't give up on the human interface. Really, really important for leaders. Yes.
Madam Secretary, Cadet Ram from the United States Military Academy. I just have a question in regards to, you didn't mention anything in regards to the Northwest Passage, and I know that there's a huge concern in regards to what Russia, what China, what Canada, what Norway is actually doing with the Northwest Passage, how we can utilize it to cut trade. For instance, the distance was 1/3 increased by over 30% in our trade revenue itself. What is the military and civilian affairs, whether it be diplomatic or economic, what are we going to do to protect the U.S. interests within the Northwest?
Well, the Northwest Passage, as you point out, is becoming a whole nother frontier for us as the ice melts and seaways open up. It is a major possible trade route for the future, which could reduce time. It could be a big economic benefit, really, for many countries in the world. Our interest always is to keep such passages free, meaning freedom of navigation, the ability for all to operate in international waters and in international skies. Now, what's happening here is that because of the ice melting and because Russia and Canada are actually the two countries with the largest border, we have a border as well through Alaska, but the big dogs on the block are Russia and Canada. Russia, in particular, is building up military bases on that frontier. Now, in fairness, it's their territory, right? You can build a military base anywhere you want when it's your territory. But it is a worrisome aspect for us because, of course, we worry should intentions turn negative, they could try to close parts of that passage. So it's something that we're monitoring a great deal. I will tell you there's certain military activity that takes place in that region, but it pales in comparison to some of the military activity that we have going on elsewhere. And this, by the way, is another challenge that you all will collectively find once you actually enter into the operational military. You will find that we are somewhat stretched thin because we are a global military. We are in all regions trying to deter, trying to maintain the peace simultaneously. So this will be another challenge. It's something at the moment that we're monitoring closely, and freedom of navigation is the pillar of the approach. Yes?
Morning, ma'am. C2C Mike Cunningham. reference to technological advancement, you talked about affecting uninhabited strike platforms. Could you talk about, in your eyes, what implications
this approach of a manned aircraft which is connected with unmanned and going in as a team, this ultimately provides the possibility that we will have more lethality, more strike opportunities. The unmanned, particularly if there's ISR capabilities, can go in and report back on situational awareness, which helps survivability, particularly of the manned platform. So we just think it's a multiplying effect, if you will, this concept of the manned connected with the unmanned platforms, both from a strike perspective and an ISR perspective. Yes.
I hear a lot about the fact that we're getting a lot more unmanned eyes on what they're doing.
Well, once again, we're monitoring. And by the way, I want to point out, neither China nor Russia are technically our enemies, right? So we partner with both, even though it's been strained relations, certainly in the last few years, but we still have certain partnerships with both. So for example, Russia has the International Space Station. We just had one of our astronauts come back via Kazakhstan from the International Space Station. And we still do business. There's all kinds of trade that goes back and forth with China. So what we do in all of these cases is we monitor, we watch, we try to keep track of the developments. But the totality of the developments is worrisome to us, the degree of investment. The unmanned systems is not like top of mind on my worry list of the investments that Russia and China are making. Top of mind on my mind worry list is space investments that they are making. I mentioned, could a future involve a conflict on Earth sparking into space? And the answer is it could, and we're trying to get ready for that. And we know that both China and Russia are investing in space capabilities which could threaten our assets. Now imagine, if you will, for a moment, the GPS constellation, which is so important for not only everything we do in the military, keeping us connected, precision strike, all of this is very reliant on the GPS constellation. But we also provide GPS to 3 billion users worldwide for your smartphones and the financial banking system and all sorts of things GPS relates to. Just imagine if a bad actor tried to blind us and take out the GPS system. Now, I don't want to get everybody shocked. We have 40 of these satellites on orbit, so we have resiliency there. But again, we're trying to get ready for what might an adversary do to us, and then we have to think 3 steps ahead of that potential outcome so that we always remain ahead. So that's actually the top of my worry list, that and cyber. Yes? Well, I think the military's focus will be, and we have been driven in recent years by failed states. So when there is not governance in a particular area, like think of some of the sections of the Middle East, parts of Africa, that's what I mean by a failed state. Think of Libya, think of places where there's all this sectarian strife and there's no strong central government to sort of keep control in a reasonable way. This is where bad actors can assemble. This is where they can train. This is where they can launch attacks at other people. This is exactly what happened in Iraq and Syria with the spread of ISIL. So as the populations, particularly in Africa, just grow enormously, as food and water and other things are in short supply, all of this means the potential for a lot more strife. And out of strife will frequently come terrorism and things like that. So that's of great concern to us. In addition to that, I'll say one other thing when it comes to depleted natural resources and the like. The military does an enormous amount of good work in the area of humanitarian assistance and disaster recovery. So whenever there's an earthquake somewhere in the world, when a hurricane devastates Haiti, you name it, if the president, needs help for a humanitarian assistance, who does he call? He calls the U.S. military. And we, of course, leap into action. And all parts of the military have a role to play in this. Very important, and sometimes it gets overlooked. People always think about the strike missions and the war time events, but humanitarian assistance is something that we have been absolutely critical for as well. Yes, please.
Hi, ma'am. When you go back to classical just war doctrine, part of the requirement there is that both parties go to the battlefield under the understanding that we may lose our lives. As we rely more and more on unmanned and autonomous war by removing ourselves so far from the battlefield.
I don't think so, no. So my answer to that, not in my opinion. I know it's an ethical debate, it's a reasonable debate to have, but I would assert the answer is no. I think it would be, in my opinion, morally unethical not to take advantage of technologies which could protect U.S. service members' lives. And these RPAs, as we call them, remotely piloted aircraft, are doing that. So the pilot on the ground and the sensor operator and the intelligence analysts, people think they're unmanned. Well, there's plenty of men and women on the ground who are operating that system. They at least are keeping a pilot out of harm's way. And by the way, we are also conducting right now in the Middle East the most precise war in the history of the planet. Meaning, thanks to the technology, again, we're leveraging the know-how and the technology, and thanks to that technology and the know-how of the people, we are literally only hitting targets that we intend to hit. I would urge you, speak to some of the World War II vets, the Vietnam vets, back in the days when bombs were a whole lot less precise than they are today. So we are conducting, again, an unprecedented, precise operation and only going after the people and things that we want to hit. Now, is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. There's always the possibility, and indeed there have been some innocent lives lost. But I would submit to you that it has been relatively few, and war is messy. It's never perfect. So I would say it would be more unethical if we didn't take advantage of every opportunity to protect our people while still getting the military job done.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Is my time up, Rob? Yes, ma'am. It is. Okay. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the conference.